This is Find Your Dream Job, the podcast that helps you get hired, have the career you want, and make a difference in life. I'm your host, Mac Pritchard. I'm also the founder of Mac's List. It's a job board in the Pacific Northwest that helps you find a fulfilling career. Every Wednesday, I talk to a different expert about the tools you need to get the work you want. Find Your Dream Job is brought to you by Top Resume. Top Resume has helped more than 400,000 professionals land more interviews and get hired faster. Get a free review of your resume today. Go to maxlist.org/topresume. Sometimes the job you want is where you already work. How do you get promoted or land a new position inside your organization? Our guest today says you need to know your goals, network internally, and track your accomplishments. Tristan Layfield is here to talk about how to move up in your company. Tristan is a career coach and resume writer. His articles have appeared in Business Insider, Black Enterprise, and The Muse. And he joins us from Detroit, Michigan. Well, let's jump right into it, Tristan. Why do you recommend job seekers look to move up in a company?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I suggest that job seekers look up to move up into a company because there's many of opportunities literally inside the company you're in, and it's always easier to land a role when you have connections with a company rather than building those connections from scratch. So I always say we want to look and see what opportunities we may have inside of a company, especially if we like to already work there, we like the people we work with, and we like the benefits and pay that we're receiving. So I think it's a really great opportunity to progress your career without having to do all the external relationship building work that you did previously to get where you are.
Do you find, Tristan, that many job seekers don't even consider the internal option, that they just start looking outside?
I think most cases, yes. Oftentimes, when I have a lot of clients come to me, they're thinking that they need to switch up their company immediately, typically because they're not getting the pay that they want or they're not getting the promotion that they want. And so oftentimes they're looking to move externally. While we do have some people who are doing that job seeking internally, I would say the majority of them are looking externally almost immediately.
Is an internal job search different from looking outside an organization? Does it require different skills, for example?
I would say that an internal job search tends to be a little bit easier oftentimes than an external job search, right? When we think about external job searches, the average job posting gets anywhere from about 150 to 250 applicants, right? Which really boils down to you having about a 2% chance of landing a role by just applying online to an external company. When you are internal, oftentimes your application and your resume are fast-tracked to that recruiter or hiring manager. So you have a bit better chance of actually being interviewed than you do actually applying externally, because you first have to get through the applicant tracking software, and then you have to get vetted by the recruiters and hiring managers, and then they decide to bring in about 5 people for interviewing. So oftentimes, applying internally can be a little bit easier than actually the external process.
Does an internal candidate for either a promotion or a new position have a built-in advantage over people who are coming in from the outside?
I'd say oftentimes it's a process advantage. It doesn't necessarily give an advantage all the time based on skills or expertise. Sometimes that is the case, though, right? These are typically people who can pull your file and sort of see what type of results you've already created for the company or organization, look at the performance management reviews that you've already had inside of the organization. So oftentimes those things can be taken into account, but I wouldn't take that process for granted and say it's a little bit of an easier time, right? I think you still have to prove that you can do the job, that you have the skills and the abilities, and that you can provide a return on investment for the organization if they put you in that role.
I'm glad you're making that point, because while we're talking about moving up within a company, often when applicants for a position hear that they're internal candidates, they think that they're doomed, that they'll never beat an internal candidate. But that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, it is not. I have seen many cases where internal candidates have gotten the interview along with a couple of external candidates, and external candidates actually ended up with the role. Now, sometimes that does create a situation where internal candidates become a little bit jaded. And then that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, how many of my clients will come to me wanting to start an external job search simply because they're not satisfied with where they've landed inside of their career with their organization currently. So, I don't, that's why I always say don't take your internal status for granted. And also don't think your external status actually counts you out.
You mentioned promotion and salary as common reasons for looking to move up within a company. What are some of the other benefits of doing this?
Some of the other benefits of moving up inside of a company, you get quite a few things. So the first thing is you get to build your skill set. All right, you get to be exposed to different things, different projects, different opportunities. Sometimes that skill set could be leadership. Right, you start to lead a team, which builds a whole new separate set of skill sets because oftentimes you have to begin hiring for that team. And so if you've never had that experience, you start to gain those type of skills. Right, and as you move up inside of a company, you tend to start gaining more visibility by whether that's mid-level or senior level management, which oftentimes can lead to other opportunities down the line if you're performing well, right? So I think many people want to move up mainly for those two reasons. Obviously, like you said, we mentioned salary. Most people are looking to get paid for their experience and expertise. And I think that's probably one of the biggest motivating factors, but there's other things that come along with it too. There's different benefits sometimes as you progress inside of a career. Sometimes there's stock options. Sometimes there's professional development budgets that you start to get and things of that sort that can really be enticing when you begin to move up inside of a company or organization.
Well, let's talk about your tips for how to move up in a company. And I know often your first suggestion is to pay attention to your performance. What do you mean by that, Tristan?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it really starts with making sure that you're setting the right goals, right? When we're talking about performance management, typically at the beginning of the year, we're working with our leadership to set goals. And when we're doing those goals, there's three things that you want to keep in mind when you're setting them. You want to make sure that they're relevant, impactful, and measurable. Right. And so, what I mean by that is when we talk about relevant, we want your goals to be relevant to both your personal and professional goals, right? Yes, your goals need to be relevant to what the company is looking for, but you also want to make sure you're getting something out of the deal here, right? Whether that be skill development or whatever the case may be, you want to make sure you're getting something out of that deal. The other thing when it comes to the R, I, and M, so relevant, impactful, and measurable, the impactful part is you want to make sure the goals that you set are impactful for the business, right? Really take the time to understand the overall team, department, and company goals to better understand how your goals will have a direct impact, right? Will it create efficiencies or increase productivity? Will it streamline compliance, eliminate fines for the company? Like, what will it actually do, right? Ultimately, you want to make sure that your goals help the company in some way. And then the last thing is measurable, right? In business, if you can't quantify the impact, then it's like it never existed. So you want to ensure that there is either a method in place to capture the data, or metrics or whatever the case may be, or you need to create one. And if you need to create one, then you need to speak with your boss on what metrics they believe are most important to capture and the most efficient and effective way to do so. So I think it really starts with setting those right goals. And then from there, it's really focusing in on those goals during one-on-ones with your boss, right? So in those one-on-ones, you want to make sure that you're checking in with your boss on your progress towards your goals, but also talk about the pitfalls that you're having, right? Because sometimes goals need to be adjusted, and that's okay. And maybe that's because the goal was too lofty. Maybe that's because the organization has shifted priorities, but you need to make sure that your energy is focused in the right area. Then from there, you also want to make sure you're having conversation about relevant metrics and key performance indicators to understand how your work really plays into the organization's larger goals, right? This is something that so many professionals miss. And it becomes very apparent during self-reviews at the end of the year. And when it comes time to do their resumes, cover letters, and LinkedIn's, right? If you can't confidently tell someone how your work impacts the organization, you aren't diving deep enough to understand how your work relates to the bigger picture, right? So you really need to get in there and understand how that plays into the larger organizations and departments' goals. And then also, during the mid-year review that most people have, right? Typically, we set the goals, we'll have a mid-year review, and then we'll have the final review at the end of the year. During that mid-year review, I suggest you openly ask, am I on track to receive a promotion at the end of the year? And if not, what do I need to change for that to happen, right? You want to get as clear as possible on the expectations of that promotion. So that way you can really understand how you get there. And then you can thoroughly fill out your self evaluation during your performance review at the end of the year to show how you've made that progress. So I think that's really where this starts. And oftentimes I see a lot of professionals not doing very well in setting those goals or advocating for themselves during their self evaluation process.
Well, I want to pause here, Tristan. And when we come back, I want to talk about how to take that information and advocate for yourself, not only in the position you have, but to use that information if you decide to seek another position within the organization. So stay with us. When we come back, Tristan Layfield will continue to share his advice on how to move up in your company. To move up in your company, you need a great resume. Find out from the experts if yours is ready. Go to maxlist.org/top resume. A top resume writer will read your resume for free. Go to maxlist.org/top resume. You'll get edits you can use to make your resume better, or you can hire Top Resume to do it for you. Go to maxlist.org/top resume. Now, let's get back to the show. We're back in the Max List studio. I'm talking with Tristan Layfield. He's a career coach and resume writer. Tristan's articles have appeared in Business Insider, Black Enterprise, and The Muse. He joins us from Detroit, Michigan. Now, Tristan, I love the points you were making about the importance of setting goals, measuring your progress, keeping your boss plugged in during the course of the year, and how that can help you lay the foundation for a promotion. Talk more about how you can use that information if you want to pursue another position in the company.
Yeah, I think really what how you use that information is what you're doing here is you're gathering receipts, right? That's what I like to call them. You're documenting what you're accomplishing along the way, and that's by collecting and sharing emails, testimonials, awards, whatever the case you may have gotten from the work that you've done to help you achieve your goals. And those things are what are going to help you make the case for a promotion. Right. So what happens is I talk to many clients and they'll say, I'm not getting that stuff from clients or internal stakeholders. How do I start to get those receipts? Right. So if you aren't receiving those things willingly, then I suggest you begin to solicit feedback from people you work with, leaders, and those external stakeholders like your clients and customers. So maybe you create surveys, one you can send internally and one you can send externally that allow those stakeholders to rate you against your goals, company values, and that promotional criteria that you got from your boss during your one-on-ones, right? And now when you're gathering that information, you then want to just sort of collate it and share that information with your boss regularly, and then utilize that in your self-evaluation during your performance review. Because what's going to happen is as you continue to share that regularly with your boss and put it in your self-evaluation, that means that the work that you're doing, the good work that you're doing is going to stay top of mind with your boss, right? So when they're having conversations about those promotional opportunities or who really shows up for the team or who really performs on the team, your name is going to be something that is there top of mind. And so that's really what we want to do. And as I said before, when we're doing those internal sort of applications, sometimes they do refer back to our performance management reviews. And so as you're filling those self-evaluations out, you're really documenting the metrics, the KPIs, and that feedback that you're getting to make the case even before you actually know you're going for another role, right? So I think that's really how you take that and you utilize it from there.
What have you seen work successfully for people who might be reluctant to ask for those receipts? Say a testimonial or an email or a note attesting to the something that someone has said about their performance. What have you seen work, Tristan?
Yeah, so sometimes we're not comfortable soliciting that feedback, and that's completely okay. One of the things, there's another method that I like to utilize, and usually I like to try to do these things in combo, not sort of separately, but sometimes they can work as one-off situations. The other thing is just really networking internally. Right. So usually people think about networking strictly as an external opportunity, right? Going to networking events for people who are in your industry, going to conferences. But this is always about external opportunities. But there's plenty of opportunity to network internally. So you want to take the time to make sure you're connecting with peers and leaders to understand what they do in the organization. So you can figure out how you can be of assistance to them, right? Because I know you're there to do a certain set of tasks, but if we can find ways to make ourselves useful to people who could potentially sing our praises, that's going to be beneficial for us as we make the case to potentially move up. So the idea here is that you want to gain a couple of things. You want to gain fans and you want to find mentors and sponsors. And oftentimes when I say those things, people are like, well, what's the difference between those, right? The first thing is fans, right? This is like your hype squad. These are the folks who amp up the crowd. They just come in and they give you a break from hyping yourself up, right? These folks really are willing to tell any and everyone how great they think you are, which helps put your brand out there for you. And at the same time, even though they may like you, they're not necessarily personally invested in your growth or development. The next thing is like mentors, right? They share investment in your development, but for whatever reason, either they're unable or they're unwilling to extend their social capital or political capital for you, right? So most often, the reason for that is that they care a lot about you, but they may not have the juice in the organization to make things happen, right? That really comes down to having the power. And that leads us to the third group, which is sponsors. Sponsors are like super fans, right? They're willing to spend that political and social capital on you. But these folks take it one step further. They invest in grooming you, right? They sort of look at you as like a protege. They help you by bringing you onto teams, projects, right? Things that they're working on that align with your interests and your skills to really help you advance inside of the organization. But they also then advocate for you in rooms that you're not in, right? Whether that's for raises, bonuses, or that promotion that you're looking for, right? So if you take the time to network internally, you can start to build these three categories. The other thing that you can do when it comes to networking internally is join employee resource groups, right? To connect with people across the organization and with leaders outside your department. This really helps raise your profile inside the organization. It makes you more visible to large swaths of the organization, which is key to the growth and development inside of a company. It also gives you insights into opportunities to work on projects outside of your immediate scope in your immediate department, which then, once again, goes back to the first point, raises your visibility. And this is another way that you can find those fans, those mentors, and those sponsors, because oftentimes you have people, like I said, from across the organization who are in there. So you can build that fan base, or you can get those mentors. But they also have people who are in mid to senior level management and also often executive people who are sponsoring the group. So these people could become sponsors for you, and they could be people who advocate for your advancement inside of the organization, right? So we talk about the things that you can take on, but then there's other things that you can do to build people who will sort of, advance your brand and advance the results that you create inside of the organization to position you for that promotion.
Well, let's talk about how to do that. What are some of your best tips, Tristan, for approaching possible mentors or sponsors and not only connecting with them, but building a relationship with them?
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great question. I think first it starts by just having a little bit of an understanding of what they do, right? So reaching out to them, maybe saying, hey, I just wanted to, understand sort of what you do inside the organization, have a little bit of a conversation with them. Like, I don't know if most of you have ever heard of informational interviews, but maybe have an informational interview with someone you're interested in potentially being a mentor or sponsor to learn more about what they do in the organization, what projects they're working on, some of the things they've learned, and some advice that you might be able to grasp from them, right? And I think that really starts the it sort of jumpstarts the relationship building process. And then from there, you want to be consistent in communication with that person, right? You want to check in with them. I'm not talking about checking in with them every day or even every week. Maybe it's you check in with them monthly, and sort of see how things are going. Maybe you ask them, is there anything that you're working on that I could potentially help you with, right? What you really want to do is find out how you can be of service or how you can provide help to that person. Because what happens is all too often we go into mentorship or sponsor relationships really thinking that these people only owe us something, right? They're only going to give us something. But really, what it should be is this should be a two-way street. And first, you need to show them that you are of value before they're willing to lay down their name, their political, and their social capital on you, right? So it's really important that you figure out what they do, figure out how you fit into that and can potentially help with that. And I think that really helps jumpstart that relationship and then have consistent communication with them from there to continue to develop that relationship.
How about fans? What is the best way of remaining connected with your fans, and how can you be a fan for others, and what should you do to help them inside an organization?
Yeah. So typically fans are a little bit easier than the mentor and sponsorship relationships because they're not something that you consistently maintain all the time, right? These are the people that you work with on a regular basis that you're doing something for. Maybe you're always pulling those reports for, or maybe you work with them on an ongoing project, right? These are people who are consistently sort of around you in your department on the project teams that you work on. And really how you build those fans is you consistently show up and you do your best in the work that you're doing, right? You pull your weight, you communicate, right? And you provide solutions, you provide, that resolution to problems that they're having. And these people will start singing your praises just naturally, right? Tristan has showed up and he's solved our issues, and he's just so amazing. You should absolutely have him on your team next time, right? They just start telling people throughout the organization. And so I really think that's how you develop those fans. It's a little bit less about, particularly finding out how you can be of use to them. You sort of know how you can be of use to them because you already have those relationships with them on a regular basis, right? You're always checking in with them. You're always talking to them. Now, how can you be a fan? Is sort of the exact opposite, right? When somebody's showing up for you or your team or your project, make sure that you pat them on the back, right? Most of us have reward and recognition programs inside of our organizations. Maybe go into that program and actually send them a reward or some type of recognition. Maybe shoot them an email and copy their boss and really say how grateful you are to have them on the team and what type of difference they made, right? Because that then provides them receipts for them to use anytime they're looking to actually advance or looking for that raise. So really put yourself in the other person's shoes. What would you like to receive from your colleagues, and do that same thing for them, right? Because you aren't the only person in the organization that's trying to advance or that's trying to get that raise. And so if you can spread sort of, the little joy or cheer by shooting an email, it doesn't really cost you much at that point in time, right? It's just simply an email that you send and copy their boss on, giving them their praise.
Finally, how do you know it's the right time, whether to seek a promotion or to apply for another position in a company?
Yeah. So I think it's when you feel like you've developed all the skills that you could inside of the role that you're in. And typically that leads to you being very bored with work, being, discontent, right? You just don't like going to work anymore because you feel bored. Things aren't engaging you. When you feel like you're not engaged, but you're able to just show up and robotically do your job now, oftentimes that means you're not being challenged. And that's a really great time to seek out an opportunity to maybe it's a promotion, maybe it's a lateral move into another department to continue developing skill sets, but it's a good opportunity to seek out a chance to really continue developing and growing yourself. And so oftentimes that's when people start to check out and think that they need to move externally, which is completely fine as well, because there's other factors that may play into that, like raises and salary and pay and things of that sort. But I think you want to start and see what opportunities are available for you in the company that you're in, especially if you already like to work there. So yeah, I typically think it's about if you are actually being challenged inside of the role that you're in, or if you feel like you've developed all the skills that you could here and it's time for you to move on.
It's been a terrific conversation, Tristan. Now, tell us what's next for you.
Yeah. So for me, I actually host a podcast called The Tap In with Tristan on the Living Corporate Network. And I provide really short form tips on a weekly basis. And I'm actually bringing all those tips together to create an ebook for people. So I think we're going to have two, maybe three ebooks on resumes and cover letters, LinkedIn and networking, and possibly interviewing and other career tips. So I'm really working hard on developing those right now.
I know people can learn more about those books once they're published, as well as your other services by visiting your website, layfieldresume.com. Now, Tristan, given all the great advice you've shared today, what's the one thing you want a listener to remember about how to move up in your company?
I want the listener to remember that they need to always be their own biggest self advocate. No one is going to advocate for you better than yourself.
Make sure you never miss an episode of Find Your Dream Job. Subscribe to our free podcast newsletter. You'll get information about our guests, free job search articles, and transcripts of every show. Go to maxlist.org/show notes. Again, that's maxlist.org/show notes. Next week, our guest will be Kyle Elliott. He's a career coach whose clients have landed jobs at companies like Facebook, LinkedIn, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. Employers hire candidates who stand out. So what makes you different from your competitors? Kyle says knowing what makes you distinctive is the key to getting the job you want. Join us next Wednesday when Kyle Elliott and I talk about how to identify what makes you fabulous. Until next time, thanks for letting us help you find your dream job.